IPS and IDS. In the first class, we defined data-centric defenses, and one of our requirements was to try and make data-centric airtight. That's not a minor or trivial requirement, and in this class, we try to figure out how we can get there. The first thing we need to consider is Intrusion Prevention Systems, or IPS, and Intrusion Detection Systems, or IDS. There's a common misconception that prevention, or IPS, is more important than detection, or IDS. The logic is, why should you detect something if you can prevent it? It's a nice argument, but a false one. To understand why, we need to talk a little about false positives and false negatives. False positives is when a security system incorrectly classifies legitimate activity as an attack. For example, when a good email gets into the spam folder. A false positive can be annoying, as in the case of misclassified emails, but it can also prevent you from doing your job if you can't log into a system you need for work. These are examples of false positives in preventive security, and because they can be debilitating and cause a lot of complaints and calls to the help desk, IPS must be designed and tuned to have low or, ideally, no false positives. Tuning security to have low false positives has the inevitable side effect of increasing false negatives. False negatives are when a security system fails to identify an attack. For example, a spam email that didn't get into the junk folder or an intrusion attempt that wasn't blocked. The requirement to have low false positives means IPS cannot block all the attacks. It cannot be designed and tuned to be very sensitive because then people can't work. That takes us to IDS or detective systems. A false positive in a detective system means a security person gets an alert on something that isn't really an attack. Obviously, you don't want too many false positives, but a certain amount of false positive is normal and expected. That means IDS can be designed and tuned to be a lot more sensitive than IPS. In other words, we need both IPS and IDS. Preventive to block as much as possible and detective to identify and alert about the rest. This gets us a lot closer to airtight. There are many other differences between IPS and IDS that make them complementary. The technologies and the type of analysis and much more. IDS let us cover more areas and threats that IPS can't. For example, administrator abuse of privilege can be mitigated by auditing using IDS. There are preventive measures that can partially limit administrator access, but none will be as comprehensive as activity monitoring. Again, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't deploy systems that limit administrator access, force separation of duties, and more. But we should start with auditing and should continue to audit even after we deploy the IPS.